going on, everybody? In this episode of Chop and Brew, a two-way split of a Michael Dawson recipe called Artimus Pils, made for our buddy Abstract Artimus. William here brewed it. We split it, fermented it in separate homes. We're going to tell you all about it and how it tastes coming up.
But first,
Previously on Chop and Brew.
There you go.
Dun, dun. Brew Day episodes of Chop and Brew are brought to you with support from Imperial Yeast, whose spring 2023 seasonal strain release, Que Bueno, is a wonderful choice for your homebrewed lagers, like the Artimus Pils. More info at imperialyeast.com. And the always rocking and rolling road crew of Chop and Brew, who show their love by way of Patreon. Join them and support the show at patreon.com/chopandbrew. So if you've been following Chop and Brew and Brewing TV for a little while, you'll remember in 2020 we were celebrating the 10th anniversary of Brewing TV. Poor little out. And the Growler, the former, now defunct magazine in town, asked Dawson to come up with a recipe to celebrate our 10th anniversary. We thought back to Artimus, Abstract Artimus. He was the theme song artist for both Brewing TV and now Chop and Brew. Just a good friend of the band and or the show. And Artimus is obsessed with Pilsners. He travels the world and loves European Pilsners specifically, but is growing to love American Pilsners as people get better at brewing them. So Dawson put together this really cool recipe, and it's not your typical Pilsner either. So William here, in his G40, did a 10-gallon batch, and we split it and pitched two different yeasts. I did Hygge, which was a limited from Imperial at the time, Danish lager, and you tossed in
S-23 from fermented. Never used it, so I figured it was a good time.
Which is a German lager that they say might be good for fruit-forward and estery lagers, which you don't really hear a lot.
No.
Cheers. Real quick to recap the brew day. Like I said, William mashed in. The grist, for the most part, is floor-malted Bohemian Pilsner. That kind of adds a lot more character than your standard Pils, right?
Yeah, for sure.
There's a little bit of Cara aroma and a little bit of aromatic malt. Both of these malts have a little bit of color to them, but it's a very small percentage. But as you can tell, it did affect the overall beer. It's this kind of deep, dark, goldish color, bordering on getting light orange. In the G40, you recirculate, mash that, pull up the big old basket. I think I showed up and it had already been, it was just boiling, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking about B-roll. I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't see all this.
Yep, Chip skipped the hard part. Yeah, you showed up for the boil, but mashing, it was pretty straightforward, no hiccups. It was nice and easy. I just put a Imperial Sparge on there, so it was nice to finally be able to use that with a full system instead of a 5-gallon batch. It doesn't fill it all the way, but easy brew day.
Pils, aromatic, and then kind of the spotlight of this Pilsner, unique Pilsner, is Kazbek hops, and there was some, is it Sterling?
Yes.
Bittered with Kazbek, then a dose of Kazbek again at 20 minutes, and then a really interesting kind of, I think, technique for a Pilsner in general is there was some flame out addition of a blend of the two hops again. So we split it. You chilled it very well. It got chilled to 48 degrees because of the groundwater in St. Paul in mid-January, we should say, is when it was brewed. So about 2.5 months ago. So we split it. I pitched the Hygge. I kept it in my ambient basement, which was about 58. Super cool to have a lager. I don't do a lot of lagers, period. Because I used to let it intimidate me. But ever since we've learned a little bit more about how in that range...
I think, not to cut you off, I think that's why we chilled it a little bit more too, now that we're talking about it a little bit more, is that we chilled it, we were hanging out for a while, so we weren't going home right away, so we wanted that little bit of extra buffer for you.
I remember getting home and pitching it at 48-ish still, though. I was like, a little rise. It's cold. So yeah, about midway, maybe 3/4 of the way through fermentation, I moved it upstairs, 2 floors up in my house, which is about 70, for kind of a end of fermentation, warm up, diacetyl rest, whatever you want to kind of call that. And then because it was so damn cold, I had the luxury of crash cooling the bucket on my front porch for 2 days, well protected from the sun. And then I put it in the fridge and got to kegging it. So along the way, I definitely wanted to get Dawson's take, and that usually means that DonO is going to be in tow. So check out these quick tasting notes from about a month ago. So midway through this kind of maturation and smoothing out of flavors of DonO and Dawson, the D&D beer factory on my front porch. So now that you saw how the Artimus Pils was brewed, split, fermented, we're here with the architect and the assistant to the regional architect.
Right.
Dawson, DonO. We have Artimus Pils in the glass. I'll probably do a side-by-side with William as well, but first and foremost, I wanted to kind of get Dawson's take on this beer. So you threw it out there as a quote-unquote Pils because it was going to be Kvite and this, that, and the other thing. What do you think of it with a Danish lager yeast?
With an actual lager yeast, I love it.
There you go.
Tastes kind of wrap done. Let me back in the house. Yeah, it tastes kind of Czech, right? Like it's got this really kind of plush malt character. The hops are, we were identifying some fruit flavors, some blueberry, some blackberry, crisp, very drinkable. Yeah, real nice.
It's got a nice bitterness, but this fruitiness that I don't expect from a lot of lagers. I think when you and I had a little sample of it, maybe last week or earlier this week, you almost said like India Pale Ale or India Pale Lager. Or just a pale lager. That's what it is. Because it's not strong enough. I think you had essentially
pale
kind of put
lager,
forth that it was almost like a pale ale meets a lager without these over-the-top hops. But Kazbek, as innocent as it can seem, does have some layered flavors to it.
Kazbek's not innocent, man.
You said rustic blackberry at one point, which is very specific.
I like getting specific. Yeah, and it's not, I wouldn't say like the intensity of that hop fruit flavor is IPA level, right?
No,
like you said, it's...
And I think we might have been drinking it, I don't know about this one. This one has a little bit of bitterness too, but we might have had something that had less hop character at the time, and then you hit yourself with that. Yeah. It's like, oh, it is a little extra something. And it made me think of like the New Belgium used to have a pale lager that I used to buy. I don't remember what it was, but...
It's just fruitier than you think a lager's. When you hear the word Pils and then drink something, this definitely has, they're not esters, but there's hop, probably even a little malt, kind of forming around these elevated flavors, I think, that don't make it quite as much. We're not going to dig into the weeds. You can check out DonO's channel, but he's got his beer from Dave Carpenter's book called Generic Green Bottle with Hygge as well. Tastes way more what you'd expect when you hear Pils, green bottle, European lager. Exactly.
Hallertau Saaz.
Yeah, I don't know if this yeast is different than, if we can taste a difference than from like a German lager, other lager yeast, but it did the job. It's clean. You did a fine job of the temperature management. And then if there was any diacetyl, it's not there now, and there may not have been to begin with, and it has no off flavor, so that's all good.
I think a pale lager is kind of probably the best thing I can wrap my head around the more I think about it.
Pale lager is the best thing anybody can wrap their head around.
Well, besides an India pale lager. I mean, that's like... When DonO is brewing those, I'm like, this is about to be a good couple of months. Because that means a lot of little mini growlers are coming my way. So anyway, probably hit up William too and see how his version went. But all hail Dawson, all hail Abstract Artimus. The recipe is going to be in the video description, of course. If I do a side-by-side with William, we're going to dissolve to that right now. So now that you know what Dawson thought of it, here in a galaxy far, far away, we're going to tell you about what we think of it.
Yeah.
What do we think of your beer, which has its carbonation, mine, which lost it in the bottle on its way over. I should say my keg literally kicked as I was coming over here to do this. So This is the last sips of mine.
We've been talking about doing it for a while, so we've both had each beer numerous times
right.
at different stages and everything. I think it was interesting how close they were. I mean, they should be close because they're both lager yeast, but there's still going to be some differences. Definitely, like with mine, got that fruity character from the yeast, I think, and some of the hops, that late addition of hops as we were talking about.
Yeah, the Kazbek is also often attributed for some fruity notes. A little bit of citrus even, I kind of think. I will say we started drinking these kind of early on. I would say like mid-February.
Yeah, probably a month.
Yeah, they were very fruity. Peach, stone fruit, kind of orangey.
I think
You had talked about how the malt might actually be doing a lot of this.
Yeah, that floor-malted Bohemian is going to have more character too, so that I think helped with that pale ale, pale lager character. But I felt like I was getting a little bit of that fruity character from that. To me, it's almost apricot, but it's really not. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think of it as apricot, but it's like adjacent to it. I don't know. Not a great descriptor, but
Stone fruit adjacent.
yeah.
But I will say, since I cut myself off from drinking it a lot more over the last few weeks to make sure we got to this point, it is now, both of them are drinking more kind of classically lager, a little bit less estery, a little bit more malty. Yours with its carbonation is still giving off this like great, clean, crisp kind of lager aroma, less of that fruitiness. But still, I would not compare it to like a Bud Miller Coors. Like,
No.
It has got this richness, this density, this substance that is quite
it's
unique.
a really rich malt character. I like it quite a bit. It's been a while since I've used that floor malted Bohemian.
As far as those two different yeast, I think they were both worked really well for this project. Considering that when Dawson made Artimus Pils, he put Pils in air quotes because it was actually supposed to be kviked. But then he threw out the options of like, you could use a Kolsch yeast and treat it this way. You could use a true lager yeast, which we finally did. It was just really cool to finally, after 3 years, brew that recipe. And shamefully, I didn't get any to Artimus because I just kept drinking through it. And then I picked the keg up maybe about 3 weeks ago. I was like, I need to not pour this till I'm going to William's house.
And I've had to hide it from my wife, my version of it, because she'll kill a keg in a week. So
very good. So I definitely suggest that recipe. We'll link it below. The growler link is still alive and well, so we'll link to that. If you brew it, please tag us. Let us know what your experience was. Did you use a different lager yeast? Did you use a Kvike, a Kolsch, Alt? What did you do with it? Also, should give a shout out. Imperial's Hygge, legend has it, it's kind of from the original lager strain from Carlsberg. So I brought this over to share it with William.
we should have bottled your half in green bottles.
I know. DonO, if you subscribe to DonO, he's actually going to have a video that I'm part of. He brewed a recipe called Generic Green Bottle from Dave Carpenter's Lager Book, which is supposed to be, it says, this is not a clone of Heineken or Carlsberg or any of those, but it's adjacent. It's green bottle adjacent. So there'll be kind of like a side-by-side tasting on DonO's channel at some point. Until next time when we visit the Death Star fermentorium of William's house. Chop for chop.
Brew for brew.
We got a white cardboard box for a tripod. We've been locked out twice. Don's in a real low chair.
He lowride him, eh?
Roll on the
Yeah, it's all infrastructure.
Yeah, battery look like it's gonna try to run out on us on top of everything else. Look at that.
Yeah,
Fancy
just
action.
like hand back by moving the box. This is how Spielberg works.
Got Jonas running around upstairs.